Echoes of Redemption. Chapter 1. Awakening in Echoes. Dawn crept over the square of echoes, casting a golden hue on the gathered crowd, their faces a tapestry of hope and desperation. Felix Sunder stood on the makeshift stage, his heart pounded in his chest as he scanned the sea of eyes, each one a reflection of his dreams and fears. This was his moment. He had to inspire them to rise for their rights before the week ended, the weight of impending doom pressing down on him. If he failed, the consequences would be permanent, a shadow over his name that would suffocate any chance of respect or stability he sought. With a deep breath, he gripped the edge of the podium, focused on the crowd before him, ready to ignite their spirits. When will we stand for ourselves? When will we say enough is enough? Felix's voice surged, passion igniting every word. The energy in the air crackled like electricity, and the crowd stirred with agreement. For a moment relief washed over him, but just as he prepared to unleash his final call to action, Yara Wexler emerged, flanked by her followers, her presence a dark cloud over his resolve. Look at him, folks, a man who would sell you out for a dime. The crowd shifted, uncertainty rippling like a wave, and a knot tightened in Felix's stomach. Time raced away from him, and his dream faltered before it had a chance to take flight. Yara's words dripped with venom, poisoning those who had just begun to believe. He speaks of freedom while hiding behind lies. Do you want to follow a charlatan? The crowd's murmurs grew louder, doubt weaving through the collective hope Felix had tried to build. Panic swirled within him, constricting his chest. 3 hours until the sun fully rose, 3 hours until Yara's influence could overshadow his efforts completely. Felix fought to steady his breath, to drown out the noise in his head. This wasn't just about him anymore. It was about the people, their rights, their future. Yara, your time will come. But today we choose integrity over deceit. His voice rang out, desperate to reclaim their attention, but doubt lingered like a shadow just out of reach. As the crowd hesitated, Felix caught sight of a few faces in the front, recognition flickering in their eyes. He pressed on, his words a lifeline. Together we can rise above her lies. We can reclaim our future. Just as he sensed the crowd's resolve beginning to shift, Yara's followers surged forward, closing ranks around her, their hostility palpable. Felix's adrenaline surged as he realized the stakes were higher than he had thought. You have until the end of the week to make a choice, he shouted, desperation spilling from his lips, the ticking clock echoing in his mind. The crowd wavered, caught between two forces, and in that moment Felix understood. He was not just fighting for their rights, but for his very soul. The morning sun struggled to pierce the thick fog clinging to the square of echoes, casting long shadows across the cobblestones. Felix stood atop the stone dais, the damp smell of the marsh mingling with the sharp odor of paint and varnish, a reminder of the art he had once created. He fidgeted with a deck of cards, the smooth edges cool against his fingertips as he scanned the crowd for familiar faces. A breeze tugged at his jacket, whispering promises of freedom, but the buzz of laughter and derision echoed around him, a reminder of his past failures. The crowd surged, restless and expectant, and he inhaled deeply, steeling himself for the challenge ahead. Today he had to earn their trust back. Felix cleared his throat, raising his voice above the throng. Yo, check it, I'm not here to play games, you know my story, right? I'm messed up, but I'm out here trying to make things right. He tried to channel the charm that once captivated art collectors, but it faltered as Yara's voice cut through the air. A few heads turned, curiosity flickering in the eyes of those who remembered him, but a shout sliced through, "Oh, please, he's just another loser looking for attention." The words landed like stones, and Felix's resolve wavered as the crowd's skepticism swelled. "Look, I get it. You think I'm just another snake oil salesman, but I'm not here to sell your dreams. I'm offering a way to take back what's yours." A ripple of unease passed through the crowd, and he felt a glimmer of hope before Yara's followers erupted again, their chants drowning him out. "You think I don't know what it's like?" he shouted, his voice raw with emotion. "I grew up where trust was a joke. I've been where you are, desperate, scared, ready to fight." He spread his arms wide, inviting them to see his vulnerability. For a moment, he caught sight of doubt flickering in a few eyes, but Yara's voice surged back. "He's just using you." Desperation clawed at him. He was losing them. Memories of his first gallery show flashed through his mind, critics turning their backs, laughter echoing in that empty hall.
The damp, earthy air of the square felt suffocating, a reminder of failures past. He had to break through. You want change? You gotta trust someone. He leaned forward, searching for those still willing to listen. I'm not perfect, but I promise I won't abandon you. I'm here for the long haul. But the crowd surged, their voices rising, drowning out his words as betrayal lingered in the air. Yara's laughter rang out again, a cold mockery that deepened the chasm between him and the audience. His heart raced, urgency surging as the stakes climbed higher. He stepped.
The square of echoes thrummed with restless energy, sunlight spilling over the cracked stone plaza, its uneven surface a tapestry of shadows and patches of stubborn grass. The air was thick with the acrid stench of burnt wood and the lingering bite of tear gas, clinging to Felix's throat and making each breath feel like defiance. Above, the skeletal remains of a once mighty empire loomed, their crumbling arches framing the chaos below, where the crowd's voices swelled into a cacophony of anger and despair. In the center, a statue of a forgotten hero stood draped in tattered banners that fluttered like echoes of lost hopes, each whisper of fabric amplifying the crowd's calls for justice and intensifying the atmosphere. Felix pressed forward, the vibrations of the crowd surging beneath his feet, a sea of discontent challenging his resolve. Fear coiled in his stomach, urging him to retreat, but he squared his shoulders, the breeze brushing against his sweat-dampened skin, a fleeting reminder of life and fight. "Listen to me," he shouted, his voice barely breaking through the din, each word a thread reaching for faces that turned away, their eyes ignited by Yara's venomous rhetoric. The chants grew louder, drowning out Felix's words like a tidal wave. The hostility of the crowd pressed down on him, stifling his voice. He glanced at the statue, its stony gaze stark against the turmoil, yet amidst the roaring tide, a few voices rose in his defense, daring to stand against Yara's manipulation. Their words flickered like fireflies in the dark, but they were not enough. The majority remained unmoved, their anger a churning sea, and Felix's spirit sank deeper, a heavy weight pulling him under. The sun hung high, casting a harsh glare over the square, illuminating cracks in the stone and divisions among the people. Felix's breath quickened, the heat pressing against him, suffocating. The breeze faded, leaving only the heavy scent of sweat and smoke. As the crowd continued to churn, Felix stood at the edge of despair, dissenting voices crashing against him like relentless waves, reminding him that time slipped away. The square of echoes held its breath, waiting for a shift, for hope to rise from the ashes, but doubt loomed larger than any chant. The square of echoes buzzed with midday energy, sunlight glinting off the cobblestones, as Felix Sunder stepped into the fray. His heart thudded heavily in his chest. He needed this moment to win back the crowd, to earn their trust and rally them for the oppressed group that had suffered in silence for too long. With the week drawing to a close, the stakes were high. If he failed today, the consequences would be irreversible. His reputation and the fragile hope of his people would crumble into dust. Inhaling deeply, he channeled every ounce of his determination. "Yo, we gotta stick together if we want to flip the script," he shouted, but his words barely broke through the cacophony of jeers that met him, a wall of hostility rising, as Yara's supporters surged like a tide. Felix's voice strained against the noise, the sea of chanting drowning out his desperate pleas. "Oh please, like anyone's actually listening to you? Justice? Really?" Yara's voice cut through the din, cold and clipped, as her supporters, faces twisted with anger, shouted him down, fists raised like a storm ready to break. The distrust of the crowd pressed down on him, a noose tightening around his resolve. He had only days left to forge a path to redemption, yet here he was, battling a tide of resentment that threatened to pull him under. Would they ever believe in him again? As he gestured passionately, a group on the fringes began to echo his words, their voices tentative but hopeful. "We're with you," Felix, one called, but the moment slipped away. Yara's supporters surged closer, faces contorted with rage. Felix's heart raced, sweat trickling down his back. The countdown loomed over him. Only days remained to salvage his reputation, and each moment felt like another nail in his coffin. The ground beneath him shifted, panic clawing at his gut as time trickled away, each second a reminder of his dwindling chances. He took a step forward, desperation flooding his voice. "Listen, we stand at a crossroads," he implored, but the crowd drowned him out, their chants rising to a fever pitch. The few voices that dared support him were crushed beneath the weight of Yara's fervent followers. The energy shifted, and he struggled to maintain their attention.
His voice wavered, and he felt the distance between him and the crowd deepen, an unbridgeable chasm that echoed his isolation. 3 days left, and the pressure escalated with every second. As the chanting intensified, Felix's breath quickened, his chest tightening with the weight of defeat. The crowd, once potential allies, had morphed into a hostile force, leaving him utterly alone in this fight. The few who had backed him were lost in the tumult of anger and resentment, but just as hope seemed to slip away, he caught a flicker of doubt in the crowd, a moment of hesitation. If he could reach that spark, perhaps there was still hope. But before he could speak, a rock flew.
The sun blazed down over the square of echoes, its relentless glare amplifying the tension crackling in the air. Felix Sunder stood at the center, his heart racing, desperation clawing at his throat. If he didn't reclaim the crowd's support before the week ended, his dream of financial stability and the respect he craved would slip through his fingers, forever tainted by Yara's influence. He cleared his throat, determination surging through him. "Yo, listen up. We can't let her divide us, all right? We gotta stand strong together against her crap." The words felt like a fragile thread, barely audible beneath the rising tide of hostility from Yara's supporters. This moment was critical, as if the very fate of the square hung in the balance. A chorus of jeers erupted, the crowd undulating like a violent sea, drowning out his voice. Felix's palms grew slick with sweat as he strained to hold their attention. "We can't let her divide us." He gestured wildly, panic threading through his veins. But Yara's supporters surged forward, their chants growing louder and more aggressive. A rock sailed through the air, narrowly missing his shoulder, the threat palpable. Felix's breath quickened, a mix of fear and anger flooding him. He had only 3 days left to turn this tide, and here he was, losing ground. He couldn't afford to back down, yet every second stretched endlessly, filled with dread. In an instant, chaos erupted. A fist connected with the face of one of his supporters, igniting the crowd into a frenzy. Felix staggered back as the scene spiraled out of control, his heart pounding, drowning out the screams. "No, stop," he shouted, but his voice was swallowed by the uproar. Confusion flickered in the eyes of his followers, who began to retreat, fear pulling them away from him. Each one that left felt like a dagger to his resolve. He was losing them, and with them his chance to reclaim what was rightfully his. The countdown was on. If he didn't act now, he'd be left with whispers of defeat. Felix's thoughts raced through his mind in a chaotic swirl, weighing his options amid the chaos. He could fight back, incite further violence, or withdraw and regroup. Neither felt right. The pressure mounted, pressing against his chest like a vice. Yara's voice cut through the noise, taunting him, promising that his failure would be permanent if he didn't act soon. "You really think you can save them? They've already made their choice, Felix." The words struck deep, a bitter reminder of his precarious position. He had to rally them, show them that unity was their only path forward. But how? The crowd's hostility swirled around him, suffocating his resolve. He had to decide, and fast. With a final glance at the faces now twisted in fear, Felix clenched his fists. Chapter 2. Whispers of Dusk. The square of echoes thrummed with tension, bodies jostling amidst the echoes of yesterday's chaos. Felix slipped through the throng, melding into the shadows of cracked stone facades, the air thick with sweat and smoke. Fear mingled with flickers of hope as he scanned the crowd. He had to act fast, reaching them before Yara Wexler unleashed her wrath. The rhythm of his heartbeat echoed in his ears, counting down the seconds until the reckoning. Every face turned to him, each pair of eyes a plea for courage. Clenching his fists, he steeled himself for what lay ahead, the weight of their expectation heavy on his shoulders. Drawing closer, Felix wove through the maze of bodies, each step a careful negotiation of space and urgency. The chant surged, crashing against the stone like a wave. "Justice!" The word pulsed through the gathered crowd, a heartbeat shared. He raised his hands, fingers splayed, signaling the protesters to quiet. If he could just catch their attention, redirect their fervor, maybe he could stave off the impending storm. But the crowd pressed forward, blocking his view of Yara's encroaching line of authority, her presence a dark cloud looming over the square. Time was slipping away, and he needed to shield them from the storm brewing just beyond the edge of the square. The clang of metal sliced through the air, and Yara's voice rang out, sharp and commanding. "You're all gonna get yourselves in trouble. Move it!" Her tone rippled through the protesters, sending a wave of fear crashing over them.
Felix's stomach twisted with anxiety. They were unarmed and vulnerable. He lunged forward. "Wait, please!" The words tore from his throat, raw and urgent, but the crowd surged backward, uncertainty gripping them like a vice. He had to remind them of their strength before Yara's threats escalated. Locking eyes with a young woman at the front, fists raised and determination etched on her face, a flicker of hope ignited within him. "Yo, don't let her mess with you. Stand strong." But as he spoke, Yara advanced, her uniform a stark contrast to the vibrant banners overhead. She pointed, eyes narrowing, and the authorities surged forward, shields locked and batons drawn. Felix recoiled, breath hitching. He felt like a phantom among them, invisible and powerless. Each step back felt like a betrayal, but he had to protect them, even if it meant retreating into the shadows. Felix melted into the alley, the din of chaos fading, but the moment clinging to him like a heavy fog. Pressing his back against the cold stone, he felt his pulse quicken, thoughts racing. Could he really leave them to face Yara's wrath alone? The thought gnawed at him. Gripping the ledge, knuckles white, he stared into
The square of echoes lay drenched in morning light. Yet a chill seeped into Felix Sunder's bones. The air crackled with the aftermath of the protest, a mix of fear and uncertainty clinging to his skin like a second layer. He stood at the edge of the square, watching the scattered crowd drift away like lost whispers, each step echoing his own failure. Time slipped through his fingers. They needed leadership, someone willing to risk everything, but with only 3 days until the deadline, the burden of his decisions loomed large. Could he truly commit to this cause, or would he falter once again? Felix scanned the square, his pulse quickening as the distant sound of sirens reminded him of the dangers lurking just beyond the horizon. He clenched his fists, torn between the urge to flee and the desperate need to act. Each moment lost felt like a betrayal. Nearby, a cluster of protesters discussed their plans for the next steps, their voices urgent and fervent. They spoke of rallies and raising awareness, but Felix understood the risks involved. The thought of exposure coiled in his stomach. And if he stepped forward, would he risk everything he'd built? With every heartbeat, anxiety coursed through him. If he failed to align himself with the protesters before the week ended, the consequences would be dire. His reputation and financial stability would dissolve like ash in the wind. Sweat trickled down his brow, blurring his vision. Yet, as he eavesdropped on their fervor, a spark ignited within him. Could he really turn his back on them? The protesters were scared but resolute, their eyes alight with determination. A longing for that kind of courage stirred within him. He took a step forward, fear clawing at his throat. What if someone caught him? What if his past resurfaced? The sirens wailed louder now, closing in. Time was running out. This was his chance to regain respect, to be someone worth following. With a deep breath, Felix stepped closer to the group, the weight of his decision pressing down like an impending storm. "Yo, I'm with you guys, let's do this," he called, his voice trembling yet resolute. The protesters turned, eyes wide with surprise and suspicion. Would they trust him? Could he prove he had changed before they could respond? A loud crash echoed through the square, and Felix's heart lurched. The authorities were drawing near, and the air thickened with dread. The moment had come, and there was no turning back. Would he be brave enough to stand with them, or would he retreat into the shadows once again? The square of echoes pulsed with a restless energy, a living tapestry woven from threads of hope and despair. Felix stood at the edge of the makeshift platform, the air thick with the scent of sweat and smoke swirling around him. Faces stared up at him, wide-eyed and expectant, their murmurs rising and falling like waves crashing against a rocky shore. This was the moment he had long awaited, yet doubt tightened its grip on his resolve, squeezing like a constricting vine. He had to reclaim the narrative, not just for himself, but for everyone who believed in the cause. The crowd held its breath, tension hanging in the air, palpable and heavy as hope and fear danced in their eyes. Would he rise to the occasion, or would the shadows claim him once more? Felix stepped forward, a rush of adrenaline flooding his veins. "Yo, we're here to grab what's ours, you get me?" His voice rang out, powerful and unwavering, but a flicker of uncertainty slithered beneath the surface. The crowd responded, a swell of voices echoing his words back at him, yet the joy was tainted with something darker. He scanned their faces, some eager, others skeptical, all searching for a glimmer of assurance.
Just as he gathered momentum, a piercing voice cut through the atmosphere, sharp as glass. Coward Yara Wexler emerged from the throng, her presence commanding, eyes ablaze with indignation. Freedom talk. You're just masking your own cowardice. Who do you think you're impressing? The air shifted, a collective intake of breath rippling through the crowd, tension coiling tighter around Felix's chest. Yara stepped closer, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, yet loud enough for all to hear. I know what you've done, Felix. I know about your secret meetings, your whispered promises to those in power. What will you do when the truth spills out? Will you still preach about self-determination? Her words hung heavy, like storm clouds ready to burst. You don't understand, he exclaimed, his voice rising with urgency. This isn't just about me, but the crowd began to shift, uncertainty clouding their resolve. Felix's heart pounded against his ribs as a battle raged within him, the fear of his past clashing with the hope of a brighter future. He had chosen this path, yet Yara's words sliced through him, exposing the raw edges of his vulnerability. He wanted to scream for them to trust him, to believe in the vision he had so fervently clung to, but doubt gnawed at his gut. He gripped the edge of the platform, knuckles white, as the murmurs turned to anxious whispers, the energy in the square distorted, caught between fear and courage. Stand with me, he urged, voice trembling, but the fire in his belly dimmed under Yara's glare.
The square of echoes was alive under the midday sun, the thrum of drums reverberating through the cracked stone plaza. Felix stood at the center, surrounded by a tide of faces, some hardened with betrayal, others glimmering with a flicker of hope. As he prepared to speak, words tangled in his throat, stifled by the weight of expectation. Yara Wexler stood at the edge of the gathering, her sharp gaze assessing, ready to strike. The atmosphere crackled with tension, the crowd's restlessness palpable. This was his moment, yet Felix felt the pressure mounting, threatening to unearth everything he had fought to keep hidden. Felix raised his hands, an instinctual gesture to quiet the growing unrest. We stand here today because we believe in a future free from oppression. His voice rose, but uncertainty gnawed at him. Dissent grew from the back, Yara's supporters rallying with chants that clashed against his words. The crowd shifted like a living entity, caught in a struggle between two forces. He rooted himself, conscious of the danger of exposure looming over him. They would see the traitor hiding in plain sight if he faltered. Yet the determination in the eyes before him ignited a flicker of resolve. Yara's voice cut through the air, sharp and commanding. Justice? Or chaos? You call this a fight, but look around. Her supporters echoed her, their voices a discordant clamor. Felix's heart pounded, the urgency of the moment pressing on him. They threatened to dismantle everything he had built. Then he noticed a young woman gripping a faded banner, her knuckles white. She met his gaze, her expression a silent plea. Strength surged within him, pushing back against his doubt. The authorities want us divided, but united we are unbreakable. The chants swelled, a cacophony of hope and fear. Felix swallowed hard, his throat dry as he scanned the crowd again. Each face mirrored a shared heartbeat, their collective determination palpable. Taking a deep breath, he let silence settle for a moment, feeling the crowd fall into a fragile quiet. Remember why we are here? Remember the voices that have been silenced? We are their echo. He pointed toward Yara, who glared back, her followers undulating like a storm. We must stand united against her. The square thrummed with energy. This was not just a protest, it was a reckoning, a pivotal moment he had to seize. He locked eyes with the young woman again, and in that fleeting connection, his resolve crystallized. He could not allow Yara's intimidation to extinguish their flame. Raising his voice, he became a rallying cry in the square of echoes. The crowd surged, their voices rising in unison, drowning out the chaos and doubt. In that moment, Felix knew they would. Chapter 3: Shadows of Solidarity. As dusk enveloped the square of echoes, the scent of smoked eel filled the air, mingling with the sharp notes of foraged mushrooms. Felix Sunder stood atop a makeshift platform, his rough-spun coat clinging to him as the crowd surged with palpable energy. The murmur of voices, punctuated by the clatter of wooden bowls exchanged among those gathered, echoed the unity that had drawn them here. Nearby, marsh harvesters returned from the bog, sharing spiced barley porridge with their neighbors. This act of sharing food became a silent promise of solidarity, reinforcing Felix's resolve to rally them against the encroaching authorities. "Ain't no way we gonna stay quiet."
Felix's voice boomed, igniting fervor within the crowd. Around him, torchlight flickered in the gathering dark, illuminating faces etched with determination. A woman near the front, her hands trembling slightly, broke off a piece of marshroot tuber and offered it to the man beside her. He nodded, respect for her courage evident as they chewed thoughtfully, the communal act drawing them closer together amidst the looming threat. "Seriously, you think yelling's going to change anything? Just walk away." A voice called from the shadows, and the crowd parted as local authorities emerged, batons drawn, forming a stark barrier against the vibrancy of the protest. Tension hung in the air like a storm cloud as Felix instinctively raised his hands, palms outward, a sign not of surrender but of peaceful intent. His breath quickened as he spotted Yara, her uniform contrasting against the dusky backdrop, their eyes meeting with an unspoken recognition. The memories of their shared past loomed over him, a heavy reminder of the stakes. The authorities shouted, demanding silence, their voices lacerating the unity Felix had fought to create. "You are breaking the law. Disperse now." A murmur rippled through the crowd, uncertainty slithering in like a cold fog. In that charged moment, he recalled his grandmother's words, "Never speak ill of the past, lest the spirits of the marsh wraiths awaken." The ancestors watched him, urging him to stand firm. He paused, glancing between Yara's anxious gaze and the crowd's growing unrest. Determination surged within him as he raised his voice once more. "They cannot take our voices. Together, we are stronger than their batons." The crowd roared in response, a swell of fervor breaking against the officers like waves against the shore. But as he spoke, he caught Yara's eyes again. Would he stand and face her, risking everything, or retreat into the shadows to protect his own identity? An electric charge filled the air as Felix took a deep breath, readying himself to lead the charge of voices. The square of echoes, once a haven of shared meals and whispered prayers for protection, now vibrated with tension.
Dusk enveloped the square of echoes, shadows stretching like fingers across the cobblestones. The air buzzed with tension as protesters rallied, their voices rising in defiance against the authorities. Felix Sunder felt the turmoil inside him, knowing he had to reach Yara before chaos consumed her. Time was slipping through his fingers. Failure to rescue her would cost him not only his reputation, but also the fragile connection he had with the group. With every heartbeat, the urgency intensified, and he could sense the authorities closing in, ready to extinguish the fire of rebellion ignited by the crowd. Felix pushed through the throng, adrenaline igniting his senses. Scanning the sea of faces, he finally spotted Yara, her determined expression illuminated by the dying light. Just as he opened his mouth to call out, a heavy hand landed on his shoulder. "You there," an officer barked, eyes narrowing in disdain. "You think you can shut us down? Not happening!" Felix felt the wild thrum of panic echoing in his chest. Confronting the officer could jeopardize their escape, but he had to act fast. Thoughts raced through his mind. What could distract the officer long enough for Yara to get away? With a fierce determination burning in his chest, he grabbed a nearby protest sign, brandishing it like a sword. "We won't be silenced," he shouted, the crowd's roar swelling around him. The officer staggered back, momentarily caught off guard. Felix glanced at the clock on the wall. 3 hours until the authorities executed their plan. Every second counted. "Oh, come on, Yara, move it before they really notice you," he yelled, urgency lacing his voice. She hesitated, fear flickering in her expression, but he couldn't let her hesitate. "You have to. I'll hold them off." As she slipped away into the crowd, guilt and fear twisted in his gut. They would know he was connected to her now, and if he was caught, it would be the end of everything. "You're making a mistake," Felix shouted, struggling against the officer's grip. The distant wails of sirens grew louder, and the seconds felt like an eternity. He had sacrificed his standing for Yara, and now the gravity of his choices pressed down on him. If he didn't escape, his chance to reclaim his name would vanish. As the officer's grip tightened, doubt gnawed at him. He had to find a way out, and fast, or everything would be lost. With the protests surging around him, he steeled himself, ready to act before the noose of consequence tightened beyond escape. Dawn broke over the square of echoes, casting a golden hue on the weary protesters huddled around makeshift fires. The air, thick with the scent of smoked eel from a nearby vendor's grill, mingled with the earthy aroma of marsh-root tubers boiling in communal pots. Felix Sunder stood amidst the flickering shadows, his rough-spun linen cloak damp from the morning mist. The remnants of a once vibrant gathering dwindled, their eyes clouded with uncertainty as the distant sound of authorities' boots grew louder. Today was crucial. They needed to rally one last time before the authorities moved in. "Ayo, we gotta hold it down, fam. Ain't no way we let 'em break us." Felix shouted, his voice strained yet urgent. The crowd stirred, glancing at one another, sharing bites of spiced barley porridge from communal bowls. A few brave souls offered their last morsels to others, a gesture of unity, though the anxiety of impending arrest gripped them. A woman dipped her head, hand over her heart, bowing slightly as she passed a bowl of porridge to an elder, the unspoken respect binding them tighter in their shared plight. As Felix continued, Yara stepped forward, her expression sharp and challenging. "Oh, please, Felix, you think a few slick words are going to make you our leader?" Her words sliced through the murmurs, and the crowd hesitated, hands gripping their bowls tighter, eyes darting away from him as if his authority slipped from their grasp. "God's willing, we fight for our rights," Felix retorted, but Yara's challenge echoed louder in their minds. "What makes you worthy of leading us?" The tension thickened, palpable as Felix's pulse quickened. Anger and fear swirled in the crowd, threatening to fracture the last remnants of their resolve. He had seen them share meals and stories, a community forged in the face of oppression. Now doubt seeped in, threatening their unity. Marching boots approached, and Felix's resolve faltered at the sight of the authorities' insignia, an unmistakable symbol of oppression. Whispers turned to murmurs of panic, fingers clenching empty bowls. He felt the distance growing between him and the crowd, but the warmth of shared meals and echoes of laughter lingered. Amidst the escalating darkness, the memory of their unity flickered, reminding him that even in despair their spirits could rise again. If only he could find a way to reignite that spark. Dusk enveloped the square of echoes, shadows creeping across the cracked stone plaza as the air buzzed with tension and the distant murmur of a restless crowd. Felix Sunder stood on the edge, heart racing as he scanned the faces of the activists he admired. They had gathered to defend their dream, their voices rising defiantly against the oppressive regime threatening to silence them. But that dream hung by a thread. With the deadline of the week looming, Felix understood that failing to shield them from the authorities would cost him everything, their trust, his reputation, and perhaps even his future. As he glanced at his watch, the seconds screamed at him. Time was running out. A sudden commotion shattered the fragile calm of the night. Felix's stomach twisted as officers pushed through the crowd, their faces a mask of authority. "Not her. Seriously?" Yara snapped, her tone cold and clipped as she stood with fists raised, passion igniting the space around her. As they reached for her, Felix's breath hitched, the weight of his secret involvement crashing down. If they arrested her, the protest would collapse, and with it the fragile hope he had clung to. Panic tightened his throat, urging him to flee. Would they expose him? He could hear the whispers echoing in his mind, friends turning into accusers. Torn between self-preservation and the instinct to protect, Felix's mind raced. "Yo, we gotta push back. Ain't no way we let them take her," he shouted, his voice trembling. The crowd surged with confused energy, many looking to him for guidance, their trust a blade at his throat. The authorities' voices rose, drowning out the cries for freedom, their scrutiny pressing down on him like a vice. If he didn't act now, the spirit of the protest would be snuffed out, and with it the chance for redemption he so desperately sought. His pulse quickened as he contemplated his next move, but then it came, a flash of recognition from Yara's eyes as she locked onto him. She understood. The officers advanced, and time slipped through Felix's fingers. "Fight back! We can't let them take her!" he shouted, his words tinged with urgency. But fear twisted his rallying cry, and doubt flickered in the crowd's eyes, mingling with the growing fear that this protest might be their last act of defiance. The crowd began to scatter, confusion rippling through the air. The tension was palpable, the threat of arrest unmistakable. Felix saw Yara struggling against the officer's grasp, her spirit unyielding even as they tightened their hold. The ticking clock echoed in his mind. If he didn't find a way to rally them, everything would be lost. A realization hit him. By the end of the week, if this protest failed, his chance for a future would vanish. In a surge of adrenaline, Felix lunged forward, ignoring the gnawing fear. The The square of echoes stretched before Felix, a vast expanse of cracked stone radiating an uneasy energy as dusk descended. Shadows wove through the uneven cobblestones, flickering against the ancient arches that loomed overhead, their weathered surfaces etched with the stories of a fallen empire. The air buzzed with anticipation, thick with the mingled scents of burnt wood and the acrid bite of tear gas, reminders of the chaos brewing. As the sun dipped below the horizon, an orange glow bathed the gathering crowd. Their voices, a cacophony of chants and cries, rose like a tide threatening to engulf him. The ground vibrated beneath his feet, each stomp echoing his inner turmoil, contrasting sharply with the heat radiating from the thrumming mass of humanity. Felix stood at the edge of the square, his hands clenched into fists as the tension thickened around him. The rhythmic pounding of drums resonated deep within, a tribal call that pulled at his very core. He hesitated, caught between the thrumming pulse of the crowd and the oppressive weight of fear that threatened to crush him. A nearby protester shouted, igniting a fresh wave of shouts among the gathered. The sound swirled around him, echoing off the ancient stone arches, amplifying his confusion. The cool breeze wrapped around him, but it could not quench the heat pooling in his stomach, a mixture of dread and a lingering hope for change. As he turned to scan the crowd, he called out, "Yo, look at that statue in the middle. Bet it's seen some wild stuff, huh?" His gaze fell upon the statue, draped in tattered banners fluttering like ghosts in the fading light. The stone was rough beneath his fingertips, a stark contrast to the smooth fabric of his shirt, which clung uncomfortably to his skin. Sweat beaded at his temples as the faces of those who had been arrested flashed through his mind. Would he join them or turn away? The thought sent a tremor through him, the collective energy around him both thrilling and terrifying. Then, from the shadows, he spotted Yara, a smirk playing on her lips as she leaned against the cold stone wall, eyes alight with a mischievous glint. Perfect. Another reminder of the risks we're all dodging. Just what I needed, she retorted, her voice clipped and dripping with sarcasm. Felix's breath caught, the intensity of her gaze igniting a fierce longing within him. She was a stark reminder of the risks he faced, the risks they all faced. He could feel the crowd's energy shifting like the approach of a storm, and in that moment he knew he was teetering on the edge of a precipice, every heartbeat echoing the ticking clock of his choices. As the last rays of sunlight disappeared, the square transformed into a cauldron of shadows and flickering. Chapter 4: Awakening in the Square. The dawn light flooded the square of echoes, illuminating anxious faces twisted in expectation. Felix stood at the edge of the makeshift stage, the wood creaking beneath him, a reminder of the fragile trust he needed to cultivate. The air buzzed with tension, charged with the scent of sweat and smoke. The crowd swelled with restless bodies, their collective heartbeat thrumming against his chest. He inhaled deeply, tasting the bitterness of doubt mixed with the sweet tang of resolve. This was the moment. He had to galvanize them, a call for unity against the looming shadow of Yara. Her smirk haunted him, tightening his throat as he prepared to speak. "Yo, we ain't just a bunch of lonely souls. Together, we're a force to be reckoned with." Felix's voice rang out, cutting through the murmurs like a blade. He stepped forward, arms outstretched, eyes scanning the crowd. Hope flickered in some, while others remained skeptical, their frowns deepening, like storm clouds. "Look around you. We've suffered long enough. We have the power to reclaim our rights." His heart raced, energy surging through him as anticipation filled the air, a pulse that begged for action. But then chaos erupted. Yara's voice sliced through the morning air, smooth and sardonic. "Oh, look! It's Felix Sunder, savior of the masses. Or is it just another self-serving player in this sad game?" Laughter erupted, a discordant rhythm drowning out his fervor. Felix felt a chill, his words trickling away like sand slipping through his fingers. Her accusations dripped with venom, and shadows of his past danced in his mind. What else did they know? What truths had he concealed? As doubt spread through the crowd, Felix squirmed under their accusatory gaze, their fears and hopes swirling around him like a chaotic symphony. He clenched his fists, nails digging into his palms. He fought to hold their gaze, to reignite the embers of hope that Yara's words had threatened to extinguish. "I have made mistakes," he shouted, the admission ripping from him like a confession. "But my desire for change is real." The crowd shifted,
murmurs of uncertainty rippling through them like a wave. Would they stand by him or turn away? Yara chuckled, that infuriating sound curling around Felix's resolve. "And what makes you different from those who've come before you, Felix? Another puppet on a string?" Her taunt stung, piercing through his bravado. He could see the faces, the flickers of doubt, the hesitation. He was losing them, one heartbeat at a time. How could he reclaim their trust when shadows of his past loomed so large as the sun crested the horizon, bathing the square in gold?
The square of echoes buzzed with morning light, the air thick with anticipation and the scent of smoked eel wafting from nearby stalls. Felix Sunder stood at the center, his rough-spun linen shirt damp against his back. Vendors called out, offering platters of marshroot tubers drizzled with Burdensbury jam, while children darted between the crowd, laughter threading through the tension. Elderly women wrapped in layered cloaks exchanged knowing glances, hands clasped over their hearts, greeting one another with slight bows, gestures of respect that hung heavy in the air. Today Felix needed their trust, but Yara's voice sliced through the atmosphere, stirring shadows of doubt among the throng. Felix raised his hands, palms open to the crowd, his voice steady despite the unease rippling through him. "Yo, Marsh folks, I'm here just like you. No fancy titles, I've been through it all just like you have. Together we gotta take back what's ours." The murmurs grew, uncertainty swelling against his words. A trader with a patchwork cloak offered a plate of salted fish to a hungry child, the boy's eyes lighting up with gratitude as he accepted the food, a silent reminder of their shared struggles. Yara stepped forward, a smirk curling her lips, sharply contrasting the vulnerable faces surrounding Felix. "Oh, and what about your past, Felix? You seriously think we're just going to pretend that never happened?" She held up a tattered contract, its ink smudged yet legible enough to stir whispers of betrayal. A few in the crowd shifted, eyes flickering in his direction, igniting doubt like a spark in dry reeds. The whispered warnings of the ancestors echoed in his mind, urging him not to invoke the past too boldly, lest the marsh wraiths awaken from their slumber. "I made mistakes, but I have learned." Felix's voice rose above the din, desperation lacing his words. "I swear by Coldra, the weaver of fates, I will not falter again." He met Yara's gaze, unflinching, but she pointed at him, a gesture considered rude, a direct challenge that rippled through the crowd. A young woman in the back held a piece of driftwood, a talisman for good luck, as if warding off the spirits that might take offense at such blatant disrespect. Felix's resolve hardened. He had to rally them, to show them the truth of his intentions, even as doubt threatened to unravel it all. As the crowd wavered between trust and betrayal, Felix took a deep breath, the scent of spiced barley porridge lingering in the air, a reminder of home and shared meals, of unity forged over communal tables. He could see the glimmer of hope in their eyes, the way they leaned in slightly, gathering courage from one another. Yet Yara's words hung heavily in the air, casting. Midday sun blazed down on the square of echoes, its heat pressing against Felix Sunder's skin like the weight of his past sins. The cracked stone plaza pulsed with a mix of tension and anticipation, surrounded by the towering remnants of a fallen empire. Shadows danced across the uneven ground, mingling with the scent of sweat and smoke. Today was not just another day. It was the last chance to rally the oppressed before Yara's lies snuffed out their hope. If he didn't speak now, if he didn't expose his true intentions and reclaim their trust, his reputation would be irreparably shattered. 3 days left to turn the tide or drown in the abyss of his own making. Felix took a deep breath and stepped onto the stage, ready to face the crowd gathered before him, their eyes flickering with suspicion and intrigue. This was his moment, and he had to lead them toward justice and away from despair. Felix scanned the crowd, faces of the hopeful and the weary merging into a sea of doubt. Yara's mocking laughter echoed in his mind, slicing through his resolve. What if they reject me? The thought clawed at him, a dark specter looming over his heart. The sun beat down, casting a spotlight on his dilemma: confess his past as a scam artist, or let Yara's shadow loom larger. But time slipped away, and he had mere moments to solidify their resolve. "I know I've played you all, but I'm here now, ready to fight with you. Let me lead this fight for justice," he yelled, the words bursting out. The crowd murmured, a wave of skepticism crashing against his declaration. Felix's pulse quickened. Rejection could shatter his last chance. Just then,
Yara's voice sliced through the murmurs like a knife. "Oh, please, you really think he can lead us? He's just a scam artist." She snapped, her tone sharp and biting. The crowd hesitated, caught in the crossfire of doubt. He could almost feel their judgment bearing down on him, and the tension thickened like an impending storm. He had to redirect their anger, to ignite a fire within them before it extinguished. "You've been deceived, yes, but you are not powerless. Fight with me. We can reclaim our dignity." As Yara pressed on, launching insults laced with truth, Felix sensed the shift in momentum. But then a voice rose above the din, filled with defiance. "He's right. He's willing to stand with us." The words spread like wildfire, igniting flickers of hope. Adrenaline surged through Felix as he grasped their passion. His heart raced with adrenaline. Time slipped away, and he had mere moments to solidify their resolve. "We are more than our pasts. Together we can rise." The crowd surged, voices mingling in a chorus of agreement, drowning out Yara's protest.
The square of echoes crackled with restless energy, a sea of faces reflecting the mingled light of hope and doubt. Felix stood at its center, his pulse racing as he declared, "We march at dawn." The crowd's roar still echoed in his ears, shadows coiling around his resolve. Yara's presence loomed, a spectre poised to shatter the fragile unity he fought to forge. With only 3 days left, the stakes burgeoned. He straightened, inhaling the acrid scent of smoke and sweat, ready to unveil a vision of justice that could unite them against their oppressors. Felix raised his voice, desperation lacing his tone. "We aren't merely whispers in the wind. We are a force. Together we'll rise up against anyone trying to put us down." His hands sliced through the air, punctuating each word, igniting flickers of resolve among the crowd. Faces hardened, eyes glimmered with a mix of fear and determination. Yet unease rippled through the throng, ready to extinguish his flame. Just then Yara's voice cut through the murmur like a blade. "Betrayal's right here, Felix. This is just another game to you, isn't it? Your words just empty fluff hiding your real agenda?" Gasps rippled through the crowd, tension thickening. Felix's despair surged as her accusation threatened to unravel the solidarity he'd woven moments before. Yara stepped into the light, defiant. "You speak of unity, yet wield power like a weapon. Who will you truly lead? The ones you choose or all of us?" The crowd swayed, divided. Their uncertainty pressed against Felix's chest, a tangible weight he couldn't ignore. Inhaling sharply, clarity seeped through the chaos. "I will not lead alone. I invite each of you to take up this mantle with me. Transparency, shared leadership together, we can dismantle the chains binding us." Murmurs rippled through the throng, some faces brightened while others remained shrouded in doubt. Clenching his jaw, determination ignited within him. He had to break through the walls of skepticism or risk losing everything. The crowd's energy shifted, uncertain yet intrigued. Scanning the faces, Felix sought a spark, a flicker of unity. "I promise to share my power. I will not hide behind empty promises." His voice rose fierce and unwavering. The air crackled with tension, a palpable heartbeat echoing against the cobblestones. In that moment, he saw a handful of fists raised in solidarity, a glimmer of hope amidst the shadows. But Yara remained, a dark presence looming over his hard-won ground. Would it be enough? As the crowd began to murmur, a fragile alliance kindled in the air. Felix felt the weight of every silenced voice upon him. He was no longer just... The square of echoes thrummed with an electric tension, a battleground of hope and uncertainty. Felix stood at its heart, the midday sun slicing through the haze of smoke and heat, illuminating the expectant and wary faces around him. Murmurs washed over him like a tide, rising and falling with each rapid heartbeat. How had it come to this moment? Each breath hung heavily, burdened by his convictions, yet doubt crept in, threatening to unravel his resolve. He stepped forward, addressing the crowd with urgency, but their expectations weighed heavily on his shoulders. Hope and fear coiled around him as the crowd awaited his call, teetering on the brink of action or apathy. Felix stepped forward, his voice cutting through the murmurs. "Yo, this ain't just any day, y'all." He thrust his fist into the air, igniting a spark among the crowd. "We stand at the edge of change, a moment of choosing." Shouts of agreement rippled through the gathering, but shadows lingered in some eyes, uncertainty clawing at their resolve. Every cheer faded quickly,
leaving only the lingering question of their true support. Before he could catch his breath, Yara emerged from the throng, eyes sharp as a dagger. Change or just another empty promise? The crowd shifted, a collective inhale. What about the promises you made, Felix? The truths you twisted? Her words, heavy with accusation, settled like lead in the air. Felix clenched his jaw, shivering as the sun's warmth felt like a distant memory. This was no time for her games. He needed to restore their faith and steady them against the storm. Felix squared his shoulders, intensity igniting within him. "I am not my mistakes," he shouted, urgency driving his voice. "I stand before you, not as a perfect leader, but as one of you. I know the pain of betrayal, the sting of loss. Together we can rise." Some in the crowd stirred, nodding, but Yara's laughter pierced the air, chilling his fervor. "And yet how can we trust you?" she challenged, a smirk tugging at her lips. The crowd swayed, a pendulum caught between loyalty and doubt, and Felix's knees buckled slightly under the weight of their scrutiny. "You must earn trust through actions, not words." Felix pressed on, urgency morphing into desperation. "Look around you. We cannot allow fear to dictate our actions any longer." He gestured to their surroundings, the remnants of oppression staining the very stones beneath their feet. "Change is within our grasp, but it requires unity." Voices began to rise again, some rallying behind him, others still torn by Yara's insidious words. Felix's heart raced.
Chapter 5. Resonance of Resolve. The square of echoes buzzed with a frenetic energy, the acrid scent of burnt wood mingling with the sharp tang of sweat. Cool evening breezes played across Felix Sunder's skin, a stark contrast to the inferno of anxiety radiating from the crowd. Distant shouts and rhythmic drumbeats melded into a chaotic symphony, each heartbeat echoing the desperate hopes of those around him. He stood atop a makeshift platform, fingers dancing over a deck of cards, the worn edges a comforting reminder of a past filled with deception. The remnants of tear gas lingered in the air, a bitter echo of battles fought. Felix's hands trembled, and his breath quickened as uncertainty gripped him, but he pressed on, determined to face the crowd's collective gaze. "Yo, listen up! We're here to make it count, you feel me?" Felix's voice cut through the murmurs, thick and textured like the smoke clinging to the air. He leaned forward, eyes scanning the faces in the crowd, searching for that spark of belief. "They want us divided, but we've weathered worse. Remember the gallery." The memory surged within him, the scent of oil paint and cheap cologne haunting his thoughts. It had been his last chance to prove himself, and it had turned to ash. He paused, his grin faltering for a moment before he forced it back. "We rose from that, didn't we?" "Mistakes? You've got a whole gallery of them, Felix. Don't kid yourself." Yara Wexler's cold voice sliced through the hopeful haze, sparking a ripple of murmurs among the crowd. The electric energy shifted into something darker. Felix's fingers tightened around the cards, their smooth surface turning rough against his skin as he glanced at Yara, watching from the edges like a predator waiting for the right moment. "What they're saying, it ain't the whole story. Just look at me. I'm a mess, sure, but I'm your mess," he spat the words, weaving humor into the tension. But the laughter was tentative, barely a whisper against the wind. "You've made mistakes, Felix. Don't think we've forgotten that." Yara stepped forward, her calculated smile barely masking the venom beneath. With a flick of her wrist, she projected an audio recording of Felix's own voice, laced with past failures. The crowd recoiled, the words dripping with manipulation. Felix's stomach twisted, nausea rising like bile. "Listen, that was a long time ago. We're talking about the future here, not my stumbles." His voice trembled, cracking as he fought for their attention. The murmurs crescendoed, twisting through the space like the shadows gathering around them. He clenched his fists, the weight of his father's words pressing down on him. The square of echoes pulsed with a tension that crackled in the air, the dusky sky blanketing the gathering like a shroud. Felix Sunder stood at the center, heart racing as whispers of doubt slithered through the crowd. The trust he had fought so hard to build teetered on the brink of collapse. Days remained before the deadline loomed, and if he failed to sway them, his dream, a future of respect and stability, would slip into the shadows forever. The weight of betrayal settled heavily on his shoulders, especially with Yara's face haunting him, a stark reminder of the despair he faced. The crowd shifted,
eyes darting away from him, murmurs rising like a tide threatening to swallow him whole. "Can we trust him after what Yara revealed?" someone whispered, and Felix's stomach twisted. Doubt hung in the air, thick and suffocating. He had spent years fighting for this moment, yet here he stood, on the edge of losing it all. The faces that had once looked at him with admiration now bore the marks of suspicion, and every glance felt like a dagger. Just 3 days until his reputation teetered on the brink of ruin. He clenched his fists, nails biting into his palms, willing himself to resist the tide of their mistrust. Felix struggled to swallow back the bitterness rising within him. He remembered why he had joined this cause, the collective dream of freedom, of a future unshackled by the past. But that dream felt distant now, overshadowed by the reality of his failures and Yara's betrayal. Each beat of his heart pounded like a warning drum, a reminder that precious moments were slipping away. Could he reclaim their faith, or would he retreat into despair, losing everything he had fought for? The weight of indecision pressed down on him, caught between the urge to flee and the desperate need to stand firm. The whispers grew louder, a cacophony of accusations and doubts. "He lied to us. How can we trust him now?" The words sliced through him, quickening his breath, shallow and frantic. Each accusation felt like a countdown, ticking away the last remnants of hope. He could feel his resolve wavering, the urge to run clawing at him, but he also felt the eyes of the crowd, waiting, watching. The stakes had never been higher. If he failed to act now, the chance to redeem himself would evaporate, solidifying his status as a fraud. Yet stepping forward felt like standing on the edge of a chasm. One misstep, and he'd plunge into the void of despair. Panic surged through him, and he fought against it. "I know I've made mistakes," he shouted, desperation coloring his voice. "But I stand here, ready to fight for your faith. We can't let this moment define us. We must unite against the darkness." The words escaped him.
The square of echoes thrummed with tension as dusk settled over the marshlands, the air heavy with the scent of smoked eel from nearby vendors. Felix Sunder stepped onto the makeshift stage. The crowd's mixed emotions pressed down on him, making his heart race. Shadows flickered across the faces surrounding him, some hardened by doubt, others ignited with hope. The sweet, tangy taste of Burdensbury jam lingered in his mouth, a bittersweet reminder of unity that felt distant now. Above, strings of lanterns flickered to life, casting a warm glow on the rough-spun linen and leather garments, patchwork symbols of resilience. The murmurs rose, the crowd shifting restlessly, and Felix needed to speak before dissent took root. Felix cleared his throat and said, "Those clowns up top are just spitting lies, man. We gotta grab our truth back, you feel me?" He gestured broadly, one hand over his heart, feeling the warmth of the crowd's gaze. Just as momentum built, Yara stepped onto a nearby platform, her voice slicing through the air. "Really, Felix? Are you weaving tales now? The one where you betray us all for a crumb of power?" Her sarcasm ignited discontent, souring the sweetness of Burdensbury jam in his mouth. As Yara wove her web of deceit, a rock struck Felix's chest, jolting him back to the chaos erupting around him. Gasps rippled through the crowd, tension snapping as voices rose, some shouting for unity, others questioning his leadership. In the front row, the marsh harvesters wore grim expressions, their struggle to provide for their families evident. "We are not alone," Felix shouted, fighting to rise above the clamor, desperate to remind them of shared meals and laughter echoing in their homes. Amidst the chaos, Felix's gaze fell on a boy clutching a piece of drowned wood, a superstitious symbol of good luck. Taking a deep breath, he braced himself to speak again. But the crowd surged, voices rising in a cacophony. "Trust in the way of the ancients," he prayed silently, invoking Caldra, the weaver of fates, hoping for strength to guide him through. Just as he steadied himself to confront Yara's taunts, an elder caught his eye, bowing slightly with one hand over his heart, a gesture of respect that underscored the gravity of their situation. This elder's presence resonated. If he could rally both old and young, perhaps hope remained. But doubt festered in the crowd, thick like an untreated wound. As chaos raged around him, Felix focused on the shadows cast by the lanterns, flickers reminding him of ancestors who had fought for their rights. They had faced their own battles, and here he stood, on the brink of losing everything. The rock's impact ignited a fire of determination. Felix stepped forward, ready to confront Yara's lies and reclaim his narrative alongside the future. The square of echoes pulsed with restless energy as dusk settled, casting long shadows across the cracked stones. Felix Sunder stood at the forefront, adrenaline coursing through him. I can't let Yara win. Not now, not when I have 3 days to regain their trust before everything crumbles. This is my moment, he thought, sweat trickling down his back as he scanned the hostile crowd for even a flicker of hope. Tension hung heavy in the air, each heartbeat amplifying the feeling of impending doom. He had to rally them against Yara's smear campaign, reclaim his narrative, and secure their future before the week was up, or risk losing everything he fought for. Felix took a deep breath, his voice steady yet urgent. "Yo, I've been in this game for us, you feel me? Yara's just throwing shade trying to break us up." Murmurs rippled through the crowd, but uncertainty lingered like a fog. He spotted Yara at the edge of the stage, smirking, her eyes glinting with triumph as she leaned into the microphone. "Oh, Felix, really? You think anyone actually believes this pathetic show? You've lied so much, it's comical." The crowd responded with jeers, drowning out his voice. A wave of dread washed over him, their distrust clung to him, suffocating. If he didn't turn this around, it would be too late before he could regain his footing. A group of former allies surged onto the stage, faces set in grim determination. "We know the truth," one shouted, raising a hand. "Felix has betrayed us." Gasps rippled through the crowd, and Felix's stomach dropped. Each accusation cut like a dagger, piercing the fragile hope he had built. "You don't understand," he pleaded, his voice trembling with desperation. "I did what's necessary for us to survive." But the crowd was no longer listening. They began to chant, a tide of discontent crashing over him. "Felix must go," the chant echoed, relentless and cruel. He felt his resolve waver, the truth slipping away like a fading whisper. Objects began to fly, a bottle shattered against the stage, shards glinting ominously in the fading light. Felix staggered back, pulse quickening. The crowd had morphed into a mob, fueled by anger and betrayal. They were no longer the people he had fought for, they were an unyielding storm. Panic surged through him. He clenched his fists, torn between standing his ground or retreating into the shadows. As he turned to flee, isolation gripped him tighter, the weight of their judgment pressing down. The chants echoed in his ears, and despair settled in. The square pulsed with animosity, and he knew Yara was poised to seize victory, solidifying her claims. There was no escape from what was coming. The stakes had never been higher. He had to regroup. Dusk settled over the square of echoes like a shroud, casting the once vibrant crowd into a dimming tableau of despair. Felix Sunder stood at the precipice, his pulse racing with each passing second, breaths shallow as the weight of his past pressed against him. Clarity eluded him, and a decision loomed before him: fight for redemption in a world that had turned its back on him, or abandon the cause entirely. The relentless ticking of the clock filled his thoughts with dread, a reminder that before the week ended he had to reclaim his name or watch it dissolve into oblivion. Time slipped through his fingers, along with the chance to restore the respect he had lost. Clenching his fists, urgency surged within him, daring him to act before it was too late. The faces in the crowd twisted into a haunting tableau, each one a reminder of his failures. Yara's betrayal gnawed at him, a festering wound that refused to heal. Had he truly inspired them, or had he only led them into the abyss? Sweat beaded on his brow as waves of self-loathing crashed over him, their disappointment echoing in his mind. He stood rigid, caught between the memories of what had been and the reality of what was. No, he couldn't abandon them. But how could he lead them when he felt lost? A shout broke his reverie, a plea for action from the remnants of his once loyal followers. Fear crashed over him, a tidal wave of doubt. If he stepped forward, would they follow, or would they turn away in disgust? Their expectations felt like an anchor, dragging him deeper into uncertainty. 3 hours until midnight, until the moment he would have to confront the reality of his choices. Could he face them then, or would he cower in the shadows of his own making? Felix took a step closer to the edge of the square, the cobblestones cold beneath his feet. The remnants of hope flickered like dying embers. "You have to decide, Felix," he said to himself, grappling with the weight of his thoughts. Each thought clashed like thunder, pulling him in different directions. The deadline loomed ominously, a dark cloud gathering over his fate, a reminder that failure would seal his fate, branding him a coward in the eyes of those he once sought to inspire. With a final glance at the crowd, Felix made his choice, or tried to at least. The decision lingered like smoke in the air, tantalizing, yet elusive. He would fight, he had to fight. But as he turned to rally his lost allies, a figure stepped from the shadows, a familiar face with a smirk that twisted his gut.
"I wouldn't do that if I were you," Yara said, her voice laced with a venomous sweetness. The clock ticked louder in his ears, drowning out all reason. The fight for his redemption had just begun, but the stakes had changed irrevocably. He was more cornered than he'd ever been. What now?
Chapter 6. Whispers of Empowerment. The spire of self-determination loomed above, its ancient stones whispering secrets of resistance. Dust motes danced in the slanted beams of midday light, illuminating the cluttered archives where Felix Sunder crouched. Determination surged within him. Yara's threats echoed in his mind, coiling around his resolve. He had to act quickly. Time was slipping away, each second a reminder of his precarious position. With urgency he swept aside brittle parchment, the musty scent of history filling his lungs. Somewhere in this maze of documents lay proof to expose the officials who had bled the people dry. The stakes had never been higher. No way back now. He was in it for the long haul, or not at all. Fingers trembling, Felix ransacked the shelves, pushing aside stacks of brittle papers and forgotten tomes. Shadows twisted around him, the weight of past struggles hung heavily on his shoulders. The air felt charged with the energy of those who had fought before him. A crumpled file caught his eye, wedged between two dusty volumes. He yanked it free, the contents spilling out, a faded map and a list of names. His heart thudded faster. These were the ties to organized crime. Names he recognized, faces that haunted the margins of his memory. This was it. He staggered back. The enormity of the discovery crashed down on him. But then a shadow loomed, blocking the light. Well, if it isn't the little thief, rummaging through what doesn't belong to you. Yara's voice sliced through the silence, smooth and taunting. A chill ran through him. She stood there, arms crossed, an unwelcome spectre with a glint of malice in her eyes. He masked his rising fear with defiance. "You shouldn't be here, Yara. This isn't your fight," he snapped, his voice steadied by sheer will. He clutched the document tighter, the evidence pressing into his palm like an anchor. Her smirk widened, but there was something else there. Uncertainty. No, she wouldn't give him that satisfaction. She needed to be careful, too. The stakes were too high for both of them. A tense silence hung between them, thick like fog. Felix could see the gears turning in Yara's mind, calculating her next move. "You think that flimsy piece of paper is enough to rally them? You're nothing but a washed-up con artist, Felix. What will you tell them, that you found a treasure among the trash?" She stepped closer, invading his space, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "I can expose you, strip away your last shred of credibility. All it takes is a word. Just one word, and they'll turn on you, just like that." He froze, the realization hit him hard. The power she wielded loomed large, but he could counter, he had to counter. "If you're going to play dirty, so will I," he shot back, adrenaline coursing through him. Yara's eyes narrowed. Dusk enveloped the square of echoes, the air thick with the aroma of smoked eel and marshroot tubers sizzling on makeshift grills. Felix stood at the edge, fingers gripping the hidden document, its edges sharp against his palm. Shadows flickered in the fading light as a crowd gathered, their murmurs rising with the smoke from the vendors' fires. Faces emerged from the darkness, weary yet resilient, eyes reflecting a defiance that ignited a spark within him. The communal spirit of the evening pulsed with energy, but the chill of Yara's threats lingered, a stark reminder of the danger looming close by. Felix watched as a group of marsh harvesters approached, hands stained with earth and reeds, sharing a burlap sack of wild rice. They passed it around, each taking a handful, the ritual of sharing binding them together in a way that transcended any chains. Yet uncertainty gnawed at him. Would they rally to his call for action, or would Yara's shadow stifle their courage? His eyes locked with an elder, whose face told a history of struggle, igniting a resolve within him. The ancestors fought for freedom. Now it was his turn to step up. A young boy dashed past, plate of Burdensberry jam clutched in sticky fingers, leaving trails on the ground. Felix couldn't help but smile, recalling how that sweet treat had once brought comfort during darker times. Each small joy reminded him of their shared humanity, even as larger threats loomed. The boy halted, hand over his heart in a gesture of respect that intensified Felix's determination. Each act of connection wove a thread into their collective struggle, and the unity pressed on him, a powerful force against the encroaching darkness. Suddenly a tinker ambled by, his cart rattling with tools and scraps, casting wary glances at the crowd. Felix's stomach twisted. This tinker had often turned his back on those in need, a reminder that not everyone was ready to defy Yara's tyranny.
Taking a deep breath, Felix stepped forward, feeling the pulse of the gathering throb beneath him, a heartbeat of uncertainty and courage. "Hey, we ain't just shadows from back then. We're the ones building what's next," he shouted, his voice slicing through the whispers, attempting to drown out the echoes of doubt. As he spoke, a wave of tension rippled through the crowd, and a rapid thump echoed in his chest. Would they respond, or would Yara's looming threat silence them? He clenched the document tighter, a talisman against the memories of those who had fallen, a silent promise to honor their legacy. The crowd shifted, eyes locked on him, caught between the lure of rebellion and the weight of fear. A hush spread across the square as the dying light glinted off the document. He could almost hear the whispers of the fallen urging him on. "Coldra, do your thing. We need you now," he called out, invoking the ancient deity as he prepared to speak. This moment could either shatter.
The square of echoes buzzed with restless energy as twilight draped its purple cloak over the gathered crowd. Shadows danced in flickering lantern light, revealing faces etched with weariness and hope. Vendors called out, offering smoky morsels of eel and steaming bowls of barley porridge, their rich scents mingling with the damp earth, a reminder of the marshy terrain that shaped their lives. Felix Sunder stood at the edge of the square, the hidden document's weight pressed against him, urging him to ignite the small flame of defiance against the corruption that had festered too long. The ancestral spirits seemed to whisper in his ear, fueling his resolve to speak out against the injustices surrounding him. Felix stepped forward, raising the crumpled paper high, the crowd's murmurs swelling as he spoke. "This document reveals the lies that bind us, the corruption that festers among the elite. The time for silence is over." His voice carried over the crowd, pulling them closer, their collective breath held in anticipation. A woman in the front, her hands stained with the remnants of foraged mushrooms, leaned forward, her eyes wide, hungry for change. Just then Yara Wexler emerged from the throng, her presence chilling the air. With a slight bow she held her hand over her heart, a mockery of respect that cut through Felix's fervor. "And how do we know this is not just another deceit?" she challenged, her tone dripping with disdain. "Are we to believe a mere scrap of paper over the honor of our leaders?" The crowd hesitated, their gazes flickering between Felix and Yara. As the crowd shifted uneasily, each heartbeat reminded him of the impending darkness that threatened their hopes. "We have suffered long enough under their rule," he pleaded. "Think of the marsh wraiths that haunt our dreams, the spirits of our ancestors urging us to rise." A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd, but Yara's sharp laugh sliced through it like a knife through spiced porridge. "The wraiths? You speak of ghosts while our children starve?" With a deep breath, Felix gathered himself, the history of their struggles coursing through him. He had seen too many turn away, too many silenced by fear. "We must gather for a feast, a communal meal to honor our ancestors and solidify our bonds." His voice swelled with passion. "Together we can?" But Yara interjected. Her finger pointed directly at him, a blatant insult in their culture, igniting gasps among the crowd. "You would lead us to ruin, Felix." Tension saturated the air, a taut string ready to snap. The evening air thickened with unease, and the flickering lanterns illuminated faces caught between fear and the flicker of rebellion. He glanced at the dimly lit shrines in the square's corners, their offerings of drowned wood and salt a plea for protection from the past wrath. "God's willing, we shall not." The square of echoes thrummed with anxious energy, the midday sun casting long shadows over the assembled crowd. At the center stood Felix Sunder, gripping a crumpled document as if it could save him. Days remained before the week closed, and the fragile hopes of his community teetered on the brink of despair. Doubts echoed in his mind, Yara Wexler's words ringing cold and sharp, threatening to sap his resolve. This was his chance to rally them, to ignite their spirits, and reclaim their trust. Failure would mean losing their belief and the respect he desperately sought to regain. He had to speak, had to summon the courage to rise above Yara's undermining presence, or risk watching everything he cared for crumble. Felix inhaled sharply, the air thick with anticipation and doubt. Faces turned toward him, eyes glinting with expectation, but tinged with uncertainty. What if he faltered? Yara's presence lingered, a spectre of failure whispering that he was unworthy of their trust. He clutched the document tighter, pinching its edges. "They're waiting for you, Felix," a voice called from the crowd. Hesitation rippled through them like a wave threatening to drown him. He had to act before the clock ran out. The week would end soon, taking with it the chance to reshape their futures. How could he seize this moment? The weight of Yara's critical gaze bore down on him, almost suffocating.
He could almost hear her dismissive laughter in the silence that fell over the square. His heart thudded, a relentless drum echoing in his chest. What if he stood up and failed? The thought gnawed at him, feeding his insecurities. 3 hours left, Felix. Just 3 hours until it's too late. He muttered under his breath, a desperate reminder that the stakes had never been higher. The crowd's eyes flickered with doubt, and he teetered on the edge of indecision, burdened by their expectations and his own fears. Felix stepped forward, drawing a deep breath as he searched for the right words. The crowd shifted restlessly, the tension palpable. Would they listen? Would they follow? The collective energy of the crowd pulled at him, yet Yara's voice cut through the murmurs. Lead them, please, like you could ever pull that off. What a joke, Felix. The words stung, igniting a flame of anger within him, but also a flicker of despair. He was fighting against more than just Yara. He was battling the very doubts that threatened to consume him. He had to push through, had to speak before the moment slipped away. "Yo, we gotta flip the script on this," he shouted, desperation fueling his voice, though uncertainty laced every word. The crowd hesitated, and for a moment it felt as if the air thickened, waiting for him to either soar or fall. A rustle at the back of the crowd caught his attention, a figure weaving through the throng, eyes wide.
The square of echoes buzzed with energy under the harsh midday sun, a restless sea of faces reflecting a mix of hope and desperation. Felix stood at the center, the spire of self-determination looming behind him, its weathered stones bearing silent witness to the struggles of the past. "It's worse than we thought, they're planning to," he declared, urgency coursing through him. A tightness gripped his chest as he surveyed the crowd, their collective breath held tight. Time slipped away, stealing their dreams. Could he ignite the spark needed to turn doubt into action? "We have the evidence," Felix shouted, thrusting a crumpled document into the air. The midday light caught the paper, illuminating the damning words. A ripple of energy coursed through the crowd, eyes darting with anticipation. Hope flickered in their expressions, but was quickly dampened by a voice that sliced through the tension. "And what proof do you have, Felix?" Yara stepped forward, her presence commanding, casting a shadow over his light. "A forgery? A trap? You can't expect us to believe you without real proof." Her words dripped with skepticism, each syllable a calculated strike. Felix gripped the podium, his pulse racing as doubt surged around him. "This document," he pressed on, voice steady, "was obtained from a trusted source. Corruption runs deep, and we must expose it." He scanned the crowd, searching for signs of belief, but Yara's influence rippled like a dark wave. Faces turned, whispers igniting like dry leaves in a fire. "Look at him," someone shouted. "What if he's part of it?" Felix's stomach twisted, anger and fear coiling within him. He had to seize this moment. "No," Felix shouted, lifting his chin. The crowd hesitated, caught in a moment of indecision. "We gotta turn this around, make him regret messin' with us." He stepped closer, face flushed with fervor. Some eyes flickered with recognition, but others remained clouded by doubt. Yara smirked, a predator toying with her prey. "You really think this is gonna work? It's just another scam waiting to happen." Her gaze locked onto his, a challenge that made him shiver. He clenched his fists, adrenaline surging through him. The line between ally and adversary blurred as he faced her head-on. "It's about all of us." Felix's voice rose above the murmur, fierce and unwavering. "We cannot let fear control us." He gestured to the spire, its stones bearing witness to countless struggles. "We stand on the shoulders of those who fought before us." The crowd stirred, a mixture of anger and hope igniting within them. But Yara's voice cut through once more, sharp and precise. "You really think this is going to work? It's just another scam waiting to happen." Anxiety. Chapter 7. Whispers of Change. The square of echoes loomed as dusk draped the sky in shades of deep purple. Shadows danced across the cracked cobblestones where lanterns flickered to life, casting a warm glow over the gathering crowd. Tension hung thick in the air, charged with the scent of sweat and smoke. Felix stood on a makeshift platform, the wood creaking beneath him, his palms slick with sweat. The crowd shifted uneasily, breaths mingling in a collective sigh. Beneath the surface, tension simmered. He inhaled deeply, the weight of their expectations pressing against him. He had sparked a flicker, now he needed to fan the flames. "Listen up, this ends now." Felix's voice sliced through the murmur, sharp and clear. He brandished a stack of documents, the papers crinkling in his grasp. "Yara has manipulated our trust,
turned our fears into her weapons. Faces shifted, eyes narrowing, the crowd leaning in, drawn by an unseen force. Hope flickered in their gazes, yet doubt loomed in the air. Momentum was crucial. "Look at the evidence," he urged, thrusting the papers toward the front. "She profits while we struggle." Yara emerged from the throng, her eyes blazing with indignation. "And what's the story with Felix now?" Her voice dripped with venom, each word a dart aimed at his heart. "A savior, or a usurper? Who benefits from this chaos?" Felix's fists clenched at his sides, her words hung like an accusation. Anger simmered beneath his skin, but he held it back, determined to stand firm, to be the anchor in this tempest of doubt. "I fight for you," he shouted, his voice steady and resolute. "I am one of you." The crowd swayed, torn between allegiance and betrayal, and he could see it in their eyes, the flicker of doubt that Yara had ignited. But then a woman in the front stepped forward, fists clenched at her sides. "We deserve better," she cried, her voice trembling but resolute. Felix's hands trembled, adrenaline coursing through him. He seized the moment. "Yes, together we can reclaim our power." The energy shifted, a swell of unity rising, voices lifting in a chorus of agreement, breaking through Yara's web of doubt. He could feel the pulse of something greater surge within him, a collective heartbeat of resilience. Yara's face twisted in rage, her supporters wavering, and Felix pressed on, his passion a beacon. "We will not be silenced," he shouted, the words pouring from him like a flood. "No more lies, no more manipulation. We demand truth." The crowd erupted, voices rising in a chorus that drowned out the remnants of doubt. Hope blossomed, vibrant and alive, weaving through the square. He had ignited a flame, and it was spreading. As
The square of echoes buzzed with a tense energy as dusk cast long shadows across the cracked stone plaza. Felix Sunder stood at the center. His heart raced in his chest, sweat soaking through his shirt. He had to ignite the fire of resolve within these people before the week ended, before their hope dwindled into despair. The corruption choking Burden's Marsh had to be confronted, or the weight of his failed dreams would become a permanent stain on his reputation. He inhaled sharply, the scent of damp earth and distant smoke grounding him. Time slipped away, and the urgency built like a storm on the horizon, the air thick with anticipation and the mingling scents of sweat and smoke. Felix raised his voice, the words tumbling out with fervor. "Yo, we can't just chill while they rob us blind. Silence is just fuel for their greed. We gotta rise up and hit back." The crowd stirred, a murmur of agreement rippling through the mass. But just as hope sparked, Yara Wexler stepped forward, her presence darkening the atmosphere. "And what's your bright idea when they come for you? Drag you out like trash? You really think shouting will scare them off?" Her words hung heavily in the air, planting seeds of doubt, and a wave of uncertainty washed over the crowd, threatening to steal their resolve. Felix's pulse raced. No, this wasn't how it was supposed to go. Yara's sneer deepened as she continued. "You think they will listen. You'll be silenced, just like the others before you." The crowd hesitated, fear creeping back into their hearts, robbing them of their courage. Felix clenched his fists. "We have 3 days, 3 days to show them we will not be broken." He fought against the rising panic, each second ticking louder. His dreams hinged on this moment. Failure now would cost him everything. "Together we are stronger than their fear." As Felix spoke, Yara's words pressed down on him, a tangible burden. "Look at each other. You are not alone in this fight. They can't silence all of us." A few voices began to echo his sentiment, rising above the murmur of doubt, but Yara wasn't finished. "They'll use your own anger against you. You'll be the ones to suffer, not them." The tension thickened, threatening to suffocate the hope he had ignited. Felix's throat tightened. He had to act fast. "If you believe in a better future, then stand with me. We are running out of time." His voice rang out, raw and urgent, cutting through the encroaching darkness. With every ounce of strength, Felix poured his heart into his words, desperation clawing at his throat. "If we don't act now, if we don't demand change before the week ends, we'll lose everything. Our dignity, our homes, our chance to reclaim Burden's Marsh." The crowd began to shift, uncertainty battling against the rising tide of hope. Yara's intimidation faltered as the square of echoes sprawled beneath a fading afternoon sun, the cracked stone plaza glowing in fiery oranges as shadows lengthened. Felix stepped into the thrumming energy of the crowd, his excitement surging. Voices melded into a powerful chorus, reverberating against the towering remnants of ancient arches.
The air was thick with the scent of burnt wood and the sweat rising from bodies pressed close together, forging a living wall of determination. Cool breezes whispered against his skin, offering fleeting relief from the oppressive heat, while the ground vibrated beneath his feet, a reminder of their collective anger. Above, the statue of a forgotten hero loomed, draped in tattered banners fluttering like fragile hopes in the wind, a sentinel watching over their struggle. Felix raised his voice, letting the words flow like a river, fueled by the fire igniting within him. "Yo, we gotta expose all the shady stuff going down, y'all feel me?" The crowd surged forward, their chants rising in a harmonious swell, echoing through the arches like a storm gathering strength. The rhythm of their resolve pulsed in the air, a palpable wave pushing against his chest, urging him on. But then, a sharp voice sliced through the unity. Yara Wexler stood defiantly at the edge of the square, her eyes glinting with malice. "Hope's just a mirage, Felix. It crumbles at the slightest touch." Her words dripped with poison, and the tension in the air snapped, uncertainty creeping into the hearts of those around him. With every word, Felix fought against the doubt Yara sowed. "Look at us, united." His voice rang out, clear and unwavering, a beacon in the dusk. The statue behind him caught the last rays of sunlight, casting long shadows that danced across the gathering crowd. Expressions shifted from fear to defiance among the townspeople, electrifying the charge in the air. The drums pounded steadily in the background, resonating with their shared purpose. He could almost touch the determination rising like heat waves from the pavement, fueling the fire within him. "We will not be silenced," he declared, the ground trembling beneath their stomping feet, a testament to their collective strength. But Yara's voice cut through again, sharp and unyielding. "Hope is a fragile thing, Felix. It shatters easily." Her words hung in the air, heavy with doubt, pressing against him like an anchor. The scent of smoke mingled with the salty tang of sweat, a reminder of the chaos that loomed just beyond the edges of the square. The crowd hesitated, uncertainty clouding their eyes, and dread washed over him. But then a woman in the front row stepped forward, her voice rising above the murmurs. "We fight for our future?" Her words ignited.
As dusk settled over the square of echoes, the sun bled crimson into the horizon, illuminating the cracked stone plaza with a fierce glow. Towering remnants of a fallen empire framed the gathering, shadows stretching and twisting beneath the statue of a forgotten hero, now a symbol of defiance. Felix stood at the edge of the crowd, his heart racing in rhythm with the rising chant, an anthem of hope surging with each moment. Yara's whispered manipulations faded into the background, overwhelmed by the collective roar. The mingling scents of sweat and smoke hung in the air, a potent reminder of their struggles and aspirations. Tension crackled like electricity as Felix stepped forward, papers clutched tightly in his hand. This was the moment that could change everything. "Yo, Yara, you can't keep dodging the truth, you know. The people got to hear this." Felix's voice sliced through the clamor, drawing sharp looks from the crowd. He moved closer, each step purposeful, the throng parting slightly as if sensing the storm brewing between them. Yara stood at the center, her stance strong, but her smile wavered as his gaze bore down on her. "You really think they care about your little papers? They just want the safety net, not your desperate ramblings." Her tone dripped with sarcasm, yet the tremor in her fingers betrayed her unease. Felix pressed on, steady and adamant. "Security built on lies is a cage. I have proof of your corruption, and it won't be buried under your fear-mongering." The crowd murmured, uncertainty flickering in their eyes as Felix raised the papers high, the evidence glinting in the dying light. "You've stolen from us, twisted our trust into something grotesque. We can reclaim it." Tension thickened in the air, charged with the collective outrage. Faces that once looked to Yara now turned toward him, determination igniting in their expressions. "Look around. Together we are stronger than divided by your lies." Yara's defiance wavered, fury flashing across her face as she sensed the tide turning. Felix stood firm, inviting their unity. The crowd surged, voices rising, a chorus of change, a symphony of courage. As twilight descended on the square, the weight of their shared resolve pressed against him, a palpable force. Would they dare to step into the unknown together? Dusk draped the square of echoes in hues of deep orange and purple, the air thick with the scent of smoked eel wafting from nearby vendors. Felix stood before the gathering, his rough-spun linen shirt clinging to him like a second skin, colors blending into the crowd's diverse backgrounds,
As he scanned the faces illuminated by flickering torches, the familiar lines of hardship etched into their features stood out clearly. Children nibbled on marsh-root tubers, their laughter mingling with the murmurs of the crowd, a stark reminder of what they were fighting for. Tension thrummed with anticipation, a heartbeat shared among the oppressed, waiting for his words of courage. "Aye-oh, we ain't gonna let fear silence us no more." Felix's voice rang steady as he pointed toward Yara, who stood defiantly on the platform. The crowd murmured, some clutching Burdensbury jam jars they had brought as offerings for the community feast. Yara's eyes narrowed, lips twisting into a sneer as she raised a hand, a gesture of authority that usually commanded respect. Tonight, however, her resolve faltered as Felix pressed on. "You all know of her dealings with the former regime. She thrived while we starved." A ripple of murmurs swept through the gathering, the weight of his words solidifying like the chilled air around them. Their energy surged within him, igniting a spark of determination. A woman in the front row raised a fist, remnants of spiced barley porridge glistening on her fingertips in the torchlight. "Justice!" she shouted, and the crowd echoed her chant, a wave crashing against the stone square. Yara's posture slumped, uncertainty flickering in her gaze as she struggled to regain control. "Really? You think they'll actually support you?" She sneered, her voice dripping with disdain. "Just wait for the chaos to hit." Felix stepped forward, his heart pounding, every beat reinforcing his determination. "Let chaos come," he declared, the words spilling from his lips like fading daylight. "We have lived in chaos for too long, and it's time we reclaim our fate. God's willing, we will not be cowed." The crowd roared, their voices rising, drowning out Yara's desperate attempts to silence them. Around them the marsh harvesters and traders paused in their duties, drawn by the fervor of the moment, their shared history tethering them to this call for change. As Felix raised his hands, palms open, a gesture that mirrored the respect owed to ancestors, the crowd fell quiet, the hum of their chants dissipating into the chill of the evening. He could almost feel the presence of the marsh wraiths, spirits of the vanished people, observing, waiting to be honored. "Together we will weave a new fate," he proclaimed, the words